Howdy there, welcome back to the channel. My name's Evan, or EJ, you can call me either one, and I recently remembered something. I remembered that I said I was gonna make a video ranking all the MCU projects all the way back in like December of last year, and I just completely forgot about it until a few hours ago.
I also feel like I should say that at some point I plan to do one of these for the MCU, ranking all the projects in that, but there's like 40-something projects in the MCU, and so that's going to be a very long video, and I don't want to record a long video right now, so we're doing DC today.
And I'm currently completely out of video ideas, so I figured I might as well knock it out right now. And I'm not going to have this intro go on for too long, because this is already probably going to be a very long video, because we have 43 projects to rank. We might be here a while. Also, just real quick before we get into the list, I know in my last video I said I was going to be, or I think I said I was going to be back to my regular like posting schedule, which is every Sunday. And that was the case, but I caught COVID after I posted my last video, and I just felt like complete garbage. I didn't feel like recording at all, so that's why there haven't really been any uploads, but I'm better now, and uploads should be back to their regular schedule. Just wanted to get that out of the way. Also, just want to say a couple things before we get into the list. Number one being, this list is strictly my opinion. You're gonna disagree with me. That's fine. That's what's great about movies. Everyone has different opinions on them. Keep it civil. And the other thing was, sorry if it seems like I'm going through most of these really quickly, but the MCU, it's very big. There's 43 projects I've got to get through, so these first, like, lot of them, I'm gonna try and keep it concise, keep my thoughts, like, very compact, but then once we get into, like, the top 15, top 10, I'll start getting a bit more in-depth and giving more of why I like these things or dislike, well, if they're in the top 15, I like them, but you know what I mean, just going more in-depth with my thoughts, just to get that out of the way. Okay, so getting right into the list, coming in at dead last, number 43, my least favorite MCU project is Thor: The Dark World. This movie is so unbelievably boring. Like, everything about it. Well, not everything about it, but most of it. I can't remember. I don't think I can even remember a single sentence that the villain said, Malekith. Can never remember anything he says or even what his goal is. He's one of the worst villains in this entire franchise. Like, nothing in it really sticks out as memorable or interesting to me. I do like the prison break scene on Asgard, and not Hela, Frigga's funeral. Those are both good scenes. But other than that, I just don't really think there's anything super redeemable or fun or anything about this movie or interesting. It's just kind of a very boring movie. Now coming in at number 42 is a very recent movie, actually. We have Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. This one, okay. This movie is kind of similar to Thor: The Dark World in the sense that I do think it's also, I wouldn't say it's boring. It's just such a, like, meh movie. Like, everything is just so unbelievably mediocre, aside from, like, one or two things. And I don't even know. This is one of the few times I've ever come out of a movie theater just feeling nothing. I didn't think it was, like, really good. It didn't have me, like, happy or anything, but I wasn't, like, super angry or, well, I was disappointed, but I was just like, that exists, I guess. It's not the most offensive thing I've ever seen, but I will also probably never rewatch it. So, yeah, it just a weird anomaly of a movie, really. Now here at number 40 is another very recent one, actually the most recent one. We have Secret Invasion. Now, Here's why this one is so low. I really like the first half of the show. The first 2 episodes I love, and the 3rd episode I like. But past that, it has like the worst drop off out of any of the MCU shows. It gets so bad. And it's the first time I've come out of an MCU project genuinely just angered at how much they managed to screw it up. Because I was so excited for this show, and they just messed it up so hard. It was, I just really fumbled that last half of the show. If you want to see more of my like in-depth thoughts on this show specifically, my last video is an hour-long review of the entire series, so if you haven't seen that, feel free to go check it out. In that last clip, I misspoke. Secret Invasion is 41. Now here at number 40, we have What If. Now, What If is actually a show... I don't hate it. Despite it being this low, I don't hate What If. But it was, like most MCU shows, very hit or miss. Like, there are some really good episodes in here, but then there are also a lot of them where I just didn't really care about what's happening, or I didn't like the way it was executed. Like, the great episodes, like the Doctor Strange one, probably the best episode of the show. That one's great. I liked the zombies episode, but it had issues. I liked the last like 2 episodes, the one where they're fighting Infinity Ultron, or the 2 where they're fighting Infinity Ultron. Those are all great, but then there was also stuff like the Party Thor episode that I just didn't care about, and I'm having trouble actually remembering what some of the other ones were. It's been a long time since I've seen the show, so maybe if I were to watch it now, it would grow on me, but it's just one of those shows where I was like, I could take it or leave it, you know? It's just kind of there. Now at number 39, I have Thor: Love and Thunder. Now this one sits kind of in a similar vein, for me anyway, as Secret Invasion, where it is something I was really excited for, but I wasn't as let down by this as Secret Invasion. I don't think this one's very good, but it has redeeming qualities. Like, even though he's only in the movie for like 10 minutes max, Christian Bale is really good as Gore the God Butcher. Obviously that's a given, it's Christian Bale, but still, he's a positive. I did like the running joke, kind of, where Thor's like in a love triangle with both of his hammers, or the hammer and the axe, Stormbreaker and Mjolnir. That was kind of funny to me. But then it also just had stuff where it's like the humor felt a bit dated, like the screaming goat stuff. That was a meme in like 2014. This movie came out in 2022, so they missed the mark on that by quite a bit. Yeah, this one overall was a letdown, but there's stuff in here that I do like. But it's still on the lower end of the spectrum in terms of the MCU stuff for me. And the main issue with this movie is that it was too humorous. Like, there were too many jokes. Like, and it's kind of weird that this is the movie that suffers from that problem, considering it has what I would consider to be something pretty dark, in the sense that this is the movie where Jane is dying of cancer. So the fact that this is the one that's just packed to the brim with jokes to the point that it's overbearing, it's just very bizarre to me. I know I'm spending a bit too much time on this movie, but one more thing, and then I'll move on, is just for a movie where the main villain is a guy called Gore the God Butcher, we don't see him kill very many gods. I think he kills like 1 in the beginning of the movie. And that's it. It's just... that's like his whole thing, and you have him kill 1 god, and then he's barely on screen for the rest of the movie. It's just... this one has issues. But moving right along now to number 38, we have Iron Man 2. Now, I don't dislike this movie, but it's very easily not only the weakest Iron Man movie for me, but the weakest movie of Phase 1, like, by a lot. Because everything else, I think, is at the very least solid. And I don't think this one's just, like, outright bad, but it's just... I don't know. Something about it just doesn't really click with me. Specifically, Whiplash as the villain. Another one of the most forgettable villains in the MCU. Just not really a super great character. Yeah, I don't really even have a lot to say about this one. It's just kind of there. I will say though, the Mark V, easily one of the best suits, or Iron Man suits in the MCU. That thing is so cool looking. Okay, now moving on to number 37. I have a feeling this one might make a few people kind of mad, but I'm not sure, to be honest. But it's Moon Knight. Now, I have very mixed feelings about this show. It's kind of another thing similar to Secret Invasion, or just the Disney Plus shows in general, where I thought it started really strong, and then the further you went along, it just kind of went down in quality. I just wasn't really super invested by the end of it. Because the first episode, this one might honestly have my favorite first episode out of any of the Disney Plus shows. I really like the first, 1 or 2 episodes of the show. And Oscar Isaac does put in a really good performance. Ethan Hawke too. But it's just, well, like I said, like the rest of the Disney Plus shows, it just falls off in the last half. But also, I've never read any Moon Knight comics, so I can't speak to this. But apparently, it's not a great adaptation of Moon Knight either. So that's also something that it really doesn't have going for it. So, yeah, that's why it's this low. Now, at this point forward, I just want to say, I think pretty much everything past this point is at least decent. You know? So, that's pretty much all I wanted to say. Now, coming in at number 36, I have She-Hulk. I think the show is alright. This is the show that made the Dude Bros mad. Everybody, every week when the show was airing, whole groups of just man babies angry about it. But I don't think the show is great, but I don't think it's bad either. From what I've heard, it's very comic accurate to how Jen is in the comics, and it does seem very accurate to all the other portrayals of She-Hulk I've seen from like video games or animated shows or wherever I've seen her before. So that's something it's got going for it, and I do really like Tatiana Maslany in the role. And there are like episodes in here that I do really like, but I feel like some of the humor just didn't land for me personally. I assume I'm not really the target audience for this show, and that's fine. But for me personally, that's why it's not any higher on the list. I don't think it's bad. I think it's solid. But, you know. Also, just real quick, I gotta point it out again. I pointed it out in my last video too, but while I'm here, I think it's so funny that the exact thing that they were making fun of in the finale of this show is exactly what the finale of Secret Invasion ended up being. Just unbelievable. I genuinely cannot fathom that's where they went with Secret Invasion. Coming in at number 35 is the other MCU project that made the Dude Bros mad, Captain Marvel. For the most part, I actually kind of like this movie. There are things about it keeping it this low, mainly the villain, because this is probably like on par with Malekith for weakest villain in the MCU. Because I just I can barely remember what the villains were even doing in this movie. So that's the main thing holding it back. I actually do like Brie Larson as Captain Marvel, but I feel like... Okay, I saw this Twitter post, I think like a month or two ago, that said something that about Captain Marvel that pretty much sums up my feelings of her as a character in the MCU, and that's that she's been around for a little bit now, around 4 years, and she's had a decent amount of appearances, but I still feel like I just don't really know anything about her, like what she actually likes or what she's into. And that's the main thing, my main problem with Brie Larson's Captain Marvel. But other than that, I do like her. And I think this movie is solid enough. It's got some very fun moments. I really like her chemistry with Samuel L. Jackson as young Nick Fury. That's probably my favorite part about this movie. But yeah, that's about all my thoughts on it. Next up, at number 34, I have Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now this one is another one that I think is solid. There's actually a lot of stuff in here that I do really like. Mainly with the stuff I like in here is like the little Sam Raimi isms. Like anytime his like actual directing style is able to shine through the MCU formula, mainly in like the editing and stuff. I think it's really fun. And I actually do really like Wanda as a villain in this movie, but dear Lord, the discourse that this movie and WandaVision started is insufferable. Because like I feel like every other week I see like Scarlet Witch stands and everybody else just getting into it on like Twitter and Instagram. It is just painful to watch. It's really just insufferable. But Wanda is a really good villain for this movie. The Illuminati scene is cool. I do really like certain things about it. I like how Black Bolt goes out specifically when she like seals his mouth and then he screams and his head just explodes. That's another one of those things that was kind of surprisingly gruesome for the MCU. Again, not saying it's gruesome compared to most other movies, just for the MCU. I just feel like I need to clear that up, because anytime someone says something in the MCU is gruesome, I just see people quote tweeting those people with that image of SpongeBob on the roller coaster, and it's just annoying. Yeah, my main issues with this movie, though, are I don't even know. It's mainly stuff towards the end of the movie. I feel like the end of this movie feels kind of rushed. Specifically, like, how the last shot of the movie is Doctor Strange just walking down the street. He's chilling. And then he just starts screaming in pain in the middle of the street. And then he just, like, looks up screaming. Then that third eye opens on his forehead. And then the movie ends. And you're like, oh, I guess that's setting up the third one, and he looks like he's in some trouble. But then, like 3 minutes later, the post-credit scene comes in, and he's just fine. He's got control of his little third eye thing, and now he's going off with Clea to do some stuff. It just felt like such a weird way to handle that. Because that seemed like it seemed like it was so important that it's the shot you end your movie on, and then you're just going to solve it in the post-credit scene. It was an issue for like 3 seconds, and now it's just solved. That's like the most baffling choice about this movie to me. It really is. Now coming in at number 33, I have Black Widow. Now, okay. I'm going to start with the stuff I really like about this movie, and that is the cast. I think everyone in this cast is great. I almost called her Natasha Romanoff. That's not right. Scarlett Johansson, I think, does a great job. Florence Pugh is probably my favorite addition to the MCU post Endgame. Like, she's one of the best people that have been added since Phase 4 started. I love her as Yelena. David Harbour is really good as Red Guardian, even though I feel like they may make him a bit too much of a joke. I hope they're kind of able to rectify that in the future and give him, maybe not treat him as much as as much like a joke as what I just said. Why can't I remember her name? Rachel Weisz is great in this movie. But my main issue with this is the villains, Dreykov and Taskmaster. I don't really love the way either of them are handled. Okay, Taskmaster is its own thing. Like, on one hand, okay, if it wasn't Taskmaster, I feel like this character as just an original villain themselves honestly isn't that bad. But it's the fact that it is Taskmaster that kind of irks me, because Taskmaster's whole thing in the comics and like video games and basically any other piece of media he's in is that he has this, I don't think it's a photographic memory, but it's basically if he sees someone do something, he can perfectly replicate it. And that's just his mind. That's not a computer, that's not technology or anything. He can just do that. And in this movie, Taskmaster is just kind of a mute, just person that's there the whole time. And it's not a memory thing. It's just they have they gender bent Taskmaster in the movie, which I don't really have a problem with. I don't really care about gender bending characters most of the time, especially people like Taskmaster or Ghost. It's fine. But in the movie, it's like a visor that she watches footage on, and she can just kind of replicate it that way. It's not like her memory or her mind. It's just technology doing it for her, and I'm not really a fan of that. That takes away basically Taskmaster's whole shtick, and it that's my main problem with the movie. But also the Dreykov stuff. My main issue with the Dreykov thing is this one scene. It's like the big climactic moment between him and Natasha. She can't harm him because he lets off a pheromone that whenever any of the widows are in like close vicinity to him, they just can't harm him. So Black Widow has to like break her nose, and so she just can't smell the pheromone, and then she can harm him. That's so goofy, and like not in a good way. There's certain things that are goofy in these comic book things that really work in their favor, but that's just ridiculous. I really don't like that whole thing. But for the most part, I think this movie's alright. But it does have some glaring issues, and that's why it's this low. Next up, at number 32, I have The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And this is a show that suffers from the same problem a lot of these MCU movies and shows are going to suffer from, and that is the villain. But this one is in a different vein to stuff like Black Widow. The villain thing in this one. So, the main antagonists of the show are these group of people called the Flag Smashers, and also John Walker. Those are the main, like, antagonistic presence in this show, right? And this show does something that I really hate when movies do and shows. When it's like the villain is making too much sense, so then they just have them do something really stupid and heinous out of nowhere, so it's clear that they're the villain. The Flag Smashers do that in this, and it's just... Why? I hate that. And also, John Walker's whole thing. I liked him as a villain for most of the show. Like, I think he was acted out well. I think he was written well. But then in the last episode, he just has this weird 180 where he's supposed to be, like, redeemed now. But it's kind of hard to redeem yourself when the whole world just watched you murder a man who was surrendering and not armed. Yeah, I don't really like the way the villains were handled in the show, but there is other stuff I like about it. I like the dynamic between Bucky and Sam. I think they have very good chemistry and are probably one of my favorite duos in the entire MCU. I'm very excited that we got Sam as Captain America in this, and I'm excited to see what, his future as Captain America. Yeah, the show I think is solid. Actually, this is a show that has grown on me a lot since I first watched it. When I first watched it, I thought it was kind of whatever, but I've actually grown to like it a lot. But the villain stuff still just really does not sit right with me. Now coming in at number 31, 31, I have Hawkeye. This is a show that I actually think got a bit too much hate when it was coming out. I think for the most part, this one is just a really fun Disney Plus show. I like that it's set around Christmas time. I like that we actually got to see a bit more of Hawkeye, like in his own thing, because we have seen a decent amount of him in like Avengers movies and stuff. But it's nice for him to finally get his own solo project. It's not a solo project because Kate Bishop is also in the show and she's like the co-lead. But you know what I mean. The main character here is Clint Barton. But also, speaking of Kate Bishop, she's great. I love Haley Steinfeld in the role. I'm really excited to see more of her going forward in the MCU. But the show also has a similar problem to the last few things, and that is the villain. But also, this one is very different from the rest of them because the main villain in this show is Kingpin, specifically Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin from the Daredevil series. And when they revealed that at the end of episode 5, I was so excited because Daredevil is one of my favorite shows. I love that show. I think Vincent D'Onofrio is incredible as Kingpin. He's probably one of my favorite villains in any comic book media ever. I think he's great in that show. So when they announced he was returning, I was understandably excited. But then the finale came around, and I don't hate the finale. I think it's decent, but I don't love the way they handled Kingpin. I just feel like it was just kind of a weird way of going about it, in my opinion. But there was other stuff I liked about it. But overall, I think the show is solid. I like the what was the Tracksuit Mafia? Is that what they were called? I thought they were funny. I liked Alaqua Cox as Echo, I think is her name, the actress's name, if I'm not mistaken. I'm interested in seeing her show. I feel like we haven't really heard much about it, though. Wasn't it supposed to come out this year and it got delayed or something? I can't really remember. But honestly, I feel like the show is pretty underrated. But that's the reason it's this low, is because of the whole villain thing. Yeah. And now coming in at number 30, I have Ant-Man and the Wasp. This movie's solid. I had fun with this one. Obviously, Paul Rudd is great as Scott Lang. It was cool to see Wasp in the MCU for the first time. Well, technically we saw her in the first Ant-Man movie, but it was for 3 seconds. Ghost is a really cool villain. I actually really like Ghost. It's a shame that we haven't seen more of her in the MCU, since she's one of the few villains that's actually still alive. I know she's going to be in Thunderbolts, or she was supposed to be. I can't remember if she got cut or something. But I would like to see more of Ghost at some point in the future. It was cool to see them get Janet back. I feel like this movie is solid, but in my opinion anyway, it's also a noticeable downgrade from the first Ant-Man movie. I really like the first Ant-Man movie. I'm a heavy defender of that one. But yeah, I feel like this one's not as good as that. But this is not bad. I think this is a solid movie. And now coming in at number 29, I have The Incredible Hulk. This is one that I've never really understood the hate for. I can understand not really liking it all that much, but I've seen people that flat out say, "Oh, just skip this one. That one's not worth it at all." But I've always thought this one was pretty solid. I know it's like very tonally different from like everything else in the MCU, and obviously Hulk got recasted. Now he's Mark Ruffalo, but in this movie he's played by Edward Norton. But I think this movie actually has some really cool stuff in it. Like I really like Hulk's design specifically. Uh, the fight versus Abomination was really cool, where they're just destroying Harlem. That was really cool. William Hurt is good as Thunderbolt Ross. It's really a shame that we haven't gotten much Hulk stuff in the MCU outside of like team up movies. I know the reason why is because Paramount owns the film rights and they can't really do anything like a solo Hulk project unless they buy the rights back or something like that. But I really do hope at some point we can kind of get back to more Hulk stuff, because I don't love where he's currently at in the MCU. But yeah, this one I think is solid. Now coming in at number 28, I have Eternals. This movie has actually grown on me quite a bit in like the last few months. I don't know why. I haven't even rewatched it since the first time I saw it, but just thinking about it, I've really grown to appreciate it a bit more. It still has issues, like the whole deviants thing. They look cool, but I feel like they weren't really super great villains. Specifically Crow. He's just kind of... It seemed like he was going to be the main villain of the movie, like, from the trailers. But he's dealt with in, like, 5 seconds. And the real villain of the movie is Icarus. And I actually do like Icarus as a villain. I thought that whole final battle where they're fighting Icarus was really cool. And I think visually this is probably one of the best looking Marvel movies of Phase 4. Like, I think this movie just looks really nice. I think the Celestials look really cool, like Arishem. He looks sick. Yeah, I feel like this one gets kind of a bad rep for not no reason. Like, I still don't think it's great or anything like that. I just think it's good. But yeah, this one's really grown on me. Now coming in at number 27, I have Thor, the first one from 2011. This is honestly, in my opinion, a really underrated comic book movie. I used to not like it very much, but as I've rewatched it over the years, I've grown to really like this one. I think Asgard looks really nice. The cast does a really good job. Chris Hemsworth is obviously great as Thor. Tom Hiddleston is great as Loki. I really like how this movie is kind of like a fish out of water story for Thor in a way. I think is just really cool. But also, Loki's a great villain. The Frost Giant stuff I think is really cool. Yeah, I've never really understood some of the hate this one gets. I think it's honestly a pretty good comic book movie. Now, at number 26, I have Avengers Age of Ultron. This is another one. I'm not going to say I don't get the hate for this one. I do get a lot of the criticisms for this one. But this is one of those MCU movies that I know a lot of people dislike. That's always just kind of been a guilty pleasure of mine. I know the main complaint with this movie is like Ultron is way too sarcastic and snarky, and he's not as intimidating as he should be. But I actually kind of like Ultron. I think James Spader that puts in a really good performance as Ultron, and I thought he looked really cool. I also kind of like how it felt like for most of the movie, the Avengers were kind of like at odds with each other. Like everybody was kind of just like sort of like super tense, and you could just feel it between everybody. I also kind of, well, never mind. But yeah, I think the entire cast does a great job, and also this is the movie where Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver get introduced, and I think they were both great additions to the MCU. Well, Scarlet Witch anyway. Quicksilver didn't really stick around very long to be a great addition, but for the little bit of time he was in this movie, I thought he was really cool. Oh yeah, and Vision is in this gets introduced in this movie. I think he's a great addition to the MCU too. Overall, I actually do like this movie, but it does have issues that keep it lower. But yeah. Now at number 25, number 25, I have Spider-Man: Far From Home. I actually really like this movie. I see people slander this one on the regular though. Like they act like this movie killed their dog or something. And I just don't get it. Like it's not the strongest Spider-Man movie, but it's far from the worst. Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 are both way worse than this movie, and you cannot convince me otherwise. But like this one has a lot of really cool stuff in it. Specifically, I really like Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio. And that nightmare sequence where he's just like tormenting Peter, probably one of my favorite sequences in any Spider-Man movie. I thought that was so cool. I like the look of the elementals. I thought they looked really cool. Tom Holland is still really good as Peter Parker. Honestly, I think this is, even though I think this is the weakest MCU Spider-Man movie, I still think it's pretty good. And I don't get how some people just flat out hate it. Now, at number 24, we have the movie that I am the biggest defender for out of any other MCU movie that gets hate. This is the one that I'm just going to defend until the day I die. I have Iron Man 3. I love this movie. I think it's great, and you cannot convince me otherwise. Sure, the whole Mandarin twist thing is not great, but other than that, this is such a good movie, in my opinion anyway. I really love just how it completely throws Tony out of his element and shows that he, even without the suit, he's extremely crafty and capable, and he still can do pretty much everything he needs to do without this multi-billion-dollar suit. But also, I really like that they also showed that he is really struggling with like anxiety and PTSD because he just carried a nuke through a alien wormhole during an invasion like last year. I love this movie. Aside from the villain, I think everything about this is great. And you cannot convince me otherwise. Now coming in at number 23, we have a project that I was actually extremely late to. I didn't watch this until like 2 months ago. But we have the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. The reason I was so late to it is because I didn't have Disney Plus at the time, and I didn't get it again until like a month or two ago, and I just caught up on all the MCU stuff I was behind on. But I really liked this. I thought it was just like a super wholesome, just like 40-minute little special about the Guardians of the Galaxy. I had a lot of fun with it. Also had a big reveal in the fact that Star-Lord and Mantis are siblings. We didn't know that before. And I really like that. Like, it makes sense because they were both just hanging around Ego. Well, Mantis was hanging around Ego beforehand, and it kind of, I was always wondering, like, why is she just, like, with him? But the fact that she's his daughter makes a lot more sense. But yeah, I actually really like the holiday special. Also, the fact that they got Kevin Bacon for it, not just playing a character, he's just playing Kevin Bacon, I think is hilarious. And now coming in at number 23, I have Loki. In my opinion, this is easily one of the better of the Disney Plus series. Like, for most of them, it kind of does that thing where it's really good in the first half and then it teeters off towards the end. But for the most part, I feel like this one was really solid all the way through. Maybe like episode 4 and 5 weren't super strong, but I feel like the finale actually picked it back up. Even then, I don't think episodes 4 and 5 were bad, but those are probably like the weakest ones in my opinion. But yeah, I think the show's really cool. I like that we met He Who Remains, who's our first like Kang variant that we ever met in the MCU, which is cool. Although there is one very large flaw in this show, and that is the the more romantic storyline. In this show, Loki finally has a love interest, which doesn't sound bad off rip, but the issue with it is that his love interest in this show is this chick named Sylvie, who, if you don't know, is a version of him from another universe, which is just so weird on so many levels, because it's basically just like they're basically siblings. I know they're technically the same person, and I don't know if that makes it weirder or less weird. I'm honestly not sure. But either way, it's just kind of disturbing, and that's the one glaring issue that I had with the show. Other than that, I really like it. But yeah, that's just a very weird decision that they made. Now at number 21, I have Captain America: The First Avenger. I love this movie. I think it's one of the best origin stories in the MCU, and it gave us one of the best characters in the MCU in Steve Rogers. I really like that it's a period piece set during World War II. It's a really good movie. Stanley Tucci's really good in it. He's not in it a lot, but for the amount of time he is in it, he's really good. Why am I blanking on the actor's name? Hugo Weaving is really good as Red Skull, even though he seemed to hate making this movie, and he was replaced the next time Red Skull came back. But he was still really good. Why does that always happen to Hugo Weaving? Where he joins this massive franchise to play the villain, and then he hates it every step of the way, and then gets recasted. It happened in this, and it happened in Transformers. I feel like he should be more careful about the jobs he picks, because he seems to really hate making movies like this. But yeah. This is honestly a really good movie, though. Now coming in at number 20, I have WandaVision. This was the first Disney Plus show that Marvel released, and it was the first thing they released after a while. After COVID hit, 2020 they did literally nothing, and then in 2021 the first thing they released was WandaVision. And this show had my hopes so high for the Disney Plus shows, because I actually really like this one. I know a lot of people hate the finale of the show, but I liked the finale. The only episode of the show that I thought was kind of was episode 7. Other than that, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I really like this is the main Disney Plus show that just had me excited to see what was going to happen next week, because the Disney Plus shows release their shows on a weekly basis, and I was just every time an episode ended, I was just oh man, now I gotta wait a week. And I don't think that's really happened since, for me. Maybe at the beginning of Moon Knight, but it kind of started to fall off the further that show went on. But yeah, this is one of the best shows they've released, easily, in my opinion anyway. But before I move on, I just gotta say, the whole Ralph Boner thing still pisses me off to this day. That's my one glaring issue with this show. That's what makes me mad to this day. But other than that, great show. Now coming in at number 19, I have Doctor Strange. Sorry, there was a gnat right in my face. But yeah, Doctor Strange at number 19. This is another movie that I really like. I think it's a very good origin story. I think the way they show the sorcery and the actual magic in this movie looks really cool. And it has some really great visuals, like that whole scene where Strange is just kind of being shot through the multiverse or whatever it was. And it's just that whole long sequence of him just seeing trippy visuals looked really cool. Had some cool fight scenes, like the one where they're Strange and the guy he's fighting are both in their astral forms, and they're fighting in the hospital. That was a really cool one. The whole Dormammu I've come to bargain thing I really liked. Overall, I think this is a really good movie. Yeah. Now coming in at number 18, I have Miss Marvel. And this and WandaVision are pretty much tied for me as the best MCU shows. This show was just a whole lot of fun. Like, Aman Vellani is great as Kamala Khan. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Aside from the whole switching the way her powers look, other than that, this is a very good adaptation of the character. I really like the whole family dynamic they had going on with her and her parents and her brother. The only thing about this show I really don't like is the whole clandestine. Was it clandestine or clandestine? I can't remember. But that whole storyline is like the weakest part of the show for me. But other than that, I had a whole lot of fun with this one, and I think it's easily one of the best Disney Plus shows they made. Like, this and WandaVision are tied for best for me. Now at number 17, I have Black Panther, and this is another one that I think is really good. Obviously, Chadwick Boseman is really great as T'Challa, and Michael B. Jordan is great as Killmonger, the villain. Just really great chemistry between those two as the hero and the villain of the story. But also, it was really cool to see Wakanda. It looks really cool. Also, the rest of the cast is great. Like, Shuri is great, Nakia, Okoye. It was also really cool to see more of Andy Serkis, even though they murder him in this movie, so he's not coming back anytime soon, I don't think. But yeah, this one's really good too. The only real problem I have with it is in the final battle, some of the CGI looks a bit rough, but other than that, this one is a lot of fun. Also, the soundtrack is great. And now coming in at number 16, I have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now, in my opinion, this is the weakest of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, but it's still really good. I still really like this movie. I think Ego is great as the villain. Kurt Russell does a really good job playing him. I think we got some really great additions to the team in this movie, like Mantis. And I know Nebula was in the first movie, but she doesn't become a member of the team until this one. So seeing both of them join the team was great. Obviously, Baby Groot was a lot of fun. This is another one where the soundtrack is really good, but that's just all the Guardians movies. The soundtracks are great for all three of those. I think it was really great to get more of Star-Lord's history and like learning where he actually came from, or not where he came from, but just like the fact that he's half celestial, and that's how he was able to hold the Infinity Stone for so long in the first one. And yeah, I just think this one's really good and really funny. The Guardians of the Galaxy movies are like extremely funny. Yeah, I really like this movie. Now coming in at number 15, I have Spider-Man Homecoming. This is another movie that I just don't get how some people hate it. Like, I get the whole complaint that it's like, oh, Spider-Man is relying too much on tech from Tony Stark, and it's just kind of Iron Boy Jr., that kind of stuff. But like, that's kind of the point of this movie specifically. I get how it can get annoying when you get in stuff like Far From Home, but in this movie, the whole point is that his whole character arc is that he's not relying too much on it, but he's too concerned with being an Avenger. He's too concerned with impressing Iron Man, and so like at the end of the second act, or like about halfway through the second act, he gets his stuff from Iron Man taken away because he lets him down, and then he proves that he doesn't need any of that. More light required. Are you kidding me? The thing that I had my ring light plugged into died, and so my ring light went out. I thought my power went out for a second. It scared the crap out of me. But what was I even saying? Oh yeah, he learns that he doesn't need any of that technology and that he's fully capable of stopping these threats on his own. And also that he needs to you know what I'm saying. His arc in this movie, I think it's great. I think Tom Holland is really good as Spider-Man. Michael Keaton's Vulture, probably, aside from the obvious ones like Thanos and stuff, probably my favorite villain in the MCU. Could just be because I really like Michael Keaton, but I just really like the way he's written and like his whole thing. I just think it's great. Yeah, I really like this movie. Now coming in at number 14, I have Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. And I just think this movie was just a beautiful send-off for Chadwick Boseman's version of T'Challa. Like, going into it, I was a bit skeptical of the choice to kill off the character, like, because Chadwick Boseman died. But, like, not because I thought it was, like, a straight up a bad idea, but just because I didn't really think anyone... Well, I kind of figured they were going to pick Shuri to be the next Black Panther going into the movie. Like, they made it pretty obvious from the marketing. Like, they never outright said it, but they showed the Black Panther suit and a person in the Black Panther suit in action, and just no one else in this movie is really built like that. Like, it was clearly Shuri. And I was skeptical about that going into it because I just thought it didn't really make sense for her as a character, at least as like the next step, because I don't know, it just didn't seem right. But like, after watching the movie, I really liked the way everything was handled. I thought the way they kind of put that version of T'Challa to rest, like, they kind of, it just felt like it was handled with a lot of respect and care, and I really liked the way it was done. But also, the villain of this movie was great. Namor, really good. I really like the whole, like, Talocan. Like, I think that's supposed to be like this version of Atlantis, but it's called Talocan. Really like that. It looked really cool. Yeah, really just a great movie. Also, just gotta say, why am I blanking on her name? This is not a good time to blank on her name. Angela Bassett. Angela Bassett puts in an absolute powerhouse of a performance in this movie. She is so good. So I just also wanted to throw that in there. Now, coming in at number 13, I have Ant-Man. And this is another MCU movie that I'm just a huge defender for. Although less so with this one, because I feel like this one doesn't get as much flack as Iron Man 3 does. But this is one that I've always really liked. This is like probably one of my favorite origin story movies in the MCU, because I think it's just a lot of fun. Like, I feel like also out of all of the MCU movies, this is the one where Scott Lang is handled the best. Like, he's still, like, he jokes around and he's still kind of a goofy guy, but he's competent. And I feel like in some of the later stuff, he kind of feels like they kind of lost it and made him feel a bit too much like a joke, specifically in stuff like Quantumania. I'm just like, why is he like this? Like, in this movie, it's made very clear that he messes around a lot and he's a crook and stuff, but he's really smart. Like, he has a master's in electrical engineering and he's very crafty, and it's very clear that he's a competent guy. And I feel like after this movie, some of that's kind of lost. But in this movie, I think it's handled very well. I really like just the whole trio of Scott, Hank, and Hope. I really like the three of them together. Also, Luis, Dave, and what's the other guy's name? Kurt. They're hilarious. They're the funniest part of this movie, in my opinion. Also, that fight scene between Ant-Man and Falcon is really great. This one just overall is a lot of fun for me. I've always really enjoyed this movie. Also, just gotta say, R.I.P. my guy Anthony. He deserved better. Now, coming in at number 12, I have Werewolf by Night. And this is one of the coolest things the MCU has ever done, in my opinion. I need them to do more stuff like this. I don't mean exactly like this. I just mean, like, this is, like, super unique compared to all the other stuff they do. And it was just such a breath of fresh air. Because, like it's like a 1940s, 50s, like, horror monster movie. And it's so cool. It's done so well. Because, like, first of all, the werewolf suit is practical. It's not CGI, and it looks great. And Man-Thing, he's obviously touched up with CGI, but they actually built a big practical Man-Thing that they had on set, and I think that looked great. and I really hope they do more stuff like that going forward. Also, very excited that Man-Thing's in the MCU now. He's awesome. But also, they could get away with it in this because it's in black and white, but this one is like really gory for an MCU project. But since it was in black and white, they could get away with it. But yeah, this one is just so cool to me, and I'm so happy it got made. But yeah, Werewolf by Night is just really sick, in my opinion anyway. I think it's so cool. Now coming in at number 11, I have Thor Ragnarok. Very, very easily the best Thor movie, in my opinion. See, this movie... This movie's so good, and it really hurts in hindsight now that we have Love and Thunder. Because I feel like they learned the wrong lesson from this movie. Because, like, up until this point, Thor was kind of like the serious Avenger. He was, like, not super jokey. His movies weren't super funny. And so they weren't doing super well, so they kind of switched it up. They brought in Taika Waititi, and he did bring it in a more comedic direction. But also this movie, it is really funny, but also it has a lot of great action, and the villain's great. And despite the fact that it's funny, it has some very dark stuff in it. Like, Thor's entire homeworld gets destroyed. Like, that's just gone. His dad dies. He has to kill his sister. Like, there's some dark stuff in here for the characters. And I feel like it was balanced well. Like, this movie's really good. But I feel like the lesson they took from it was people want Thor to be more jokey. Cram the next Thor movie full of this stuff, and that's how we ended up with Love and Thunder. And I just feel like it kind of hurts to see that, with hindsight. But this movie's still great, and I do really like it a lot. Okay, we're now entering the top 10. And at number 10, I have Iron Man from 2008. This movie is still so great. It holds up so well. Sorry, excuse me. But yeah, it holds up so well. Like, the CGI still looks great. Robert Downey Jr. obviously was perfect casting as Iron Man. It's going to be very hard to beat that in terms of, like, comic book castings. But also, like, the fact that this movie just jump-started everything and really got this universe rolling, and it became what it is today. It's just crazy to me. Because, like, when you look at it now, like, through the lens of everything that's happened in the MCU, it's pretty grounded compared to everything else. Like, obviously, the Iron Man suit can't be real, and he can't be flying around shooting lasers and stuff, but this movie still feels very grounded in reality compared to some of the stuff we get now, like, say, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, or Guardians of the Galaxy. And I just find it crazy that this movie really got the ball rolling for them to make stuff like that. And you really just have to give credit to this movie for what it was able to accomplish and what it started. Like, regardless of how you feel about the MCU, it's insane what this thing was able to do. And it's still a great movie. And now coming in at number 9, I have Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. This movie is really good. This is another one where it's just a really great origin story. I know a lot of people dislike, like, the third act of this movie, and that it does just kind of become a big CGI fest, but, like, I was watching two dragons fight each other, and martial arts was involved, so I was happy. I don't care that it was CGI. I thought it looked really cool, and I really liked this movie. And Mandarin fans got justice because they rectified the mistake they made in Iron Man 3, and we had an actually good version of the Mandarin in this movie. So that was great. Yeah, the fight choreography was sick. Like, that bus fight, dude, that might be one of my favorite fights in the MCU. It was so good. Yeah, I just really like this movie. Also, just want to say real quick, I'm a big fan of Morris. I like that little guy. And now coming in at number 8, I have The Avengers, the first one. What I said about Iron Man, this one, it kind of also applies to this one a little bit. Not in the sense that it like jump-started the universe and really got the ball rolling, but just something like this had never been done before, where they took 6 very like larger than life characters who most of them had their own like movies previous, all these separate movies, and they just brought them all together into this culmination of those movies beforehand, and it worked. It was so good. Like the chemistry of everybody in this movie is really good. The cast is great. Just, I don't have much to say about it. It's really good. And now coming in at number 7, I have Avengers Endgame. It might be sacrilege to not have this higher, but like, I pretty much love everything in this top 10 about equally. Like, I love all these movies going forward, but Avengers Endgame, God, what an experience it was. Well, like around the time this movie was coming out, to be a Marvel fan, it was crazy. Like, I remember that no one even knew what the title of it was until the first trailer came out. Like, everybody was speculating. Like, I saw people guess Endgame, but I also saw people guess like Annihilation and stuff like that, and it was just so cool. And then when the trailers actually came out, they tried their best not to use a ton of footage from throughout the movie. Most of it's like from near the start, and there's some stuff from the final battle. But yeah, just everything leading up to this movie was great, like in terms of just the hype, but also the movie itself, I think, really is great. Like, I don't know if I'm ever going to have a theater experience like this again. Like, I got so many just goosebumps watching this in theaters. And I remember just, like, hearing the theater go silent when Iron Man died, and just hearing people, like, crying and their noses sniffling. It was so good, man. It's such a good, just, ending to the first 3 phases. I don't know if they're ever going to be able to replicate this. Like, I know they got the next 2 Avengers movies coming and people are excited for them, but like, the reason this movie and Infinity War were so effective is because everything leading up to it, or not everything, but most of the stuff leading up to those 2 movies was great too, or were great. And I like a lot of the stuff that's been released post-Endgame, but it hasn't had that feeling of cohesion, and some of it's felt kind of messy, and I just don't know if the next 2 Avengers movies are going to feel like as nice of a payoff compared to the last 2 because of that. But man, this is a great movie. And speaking of the hype leading up to the movie and like people guessing the title, do y'all remember this picture that the Russos posted? And like the amount of speculation that went on about this picture? I'm not going to get into it a lot here, but just if you know, you know, because this started so much stuff. But now coming in at number 6, I have Guardians of the Galaxy. I love this movie. Just one of my favorite, like, I don't know if I call it an origin story movie, but just like, I don't know, it's just so good. Like, the soundtrack is great, the chemistry between everyone in the cast is great. You guys know I'm a big fan of James Gunn as a director, so it's no surprise that I love the Guardians movies. But yeah, this one is just top tier for me. And now coming in at number 5, I have Spider-Man No Way Home. I feel like I'm going to sound like a broken record with this top 5, because I just keep saying I just love this movie. But I do. I love these movies. And this one is another one that I love. Just, I know a lot of people say that it's just like fan service, the movie, or it's just like nostalgia bait, or it's just full of cameos. No. Like, even without all the characters that are from the previous stuff, this is still a good movie. Like, it's well written, it's well directed, it's a good movie. But also, there's one cameo in this movie. There is one person that appears in this movie that can be qualified as a cameo. The rest of them are just characters in the movie, but you're calling it nostalgia bait or cameos because they're people you know. Because, like, Andrew and Toby are in it for, like, half an hour. All the villains are in it for the majority of it. The only person in this movie that can really be counted as a cameo is Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock, because he's there for one scene and then he's not in the rest of the movie. Everyone else are just characters in the movie that are actually, like, vital to the story. So, yeah, I don't get that whole argument. But also, I feel like everything was just handled really well. Like, I love this one. Also, before I stop, where it ends off has me so excited for the future of Spider-Man in the MCU, because he's, like, fully just alone now, and he can't rely on anyone else's technology or anything like that. He's gonna have to do it all himself, and I'm very excited to see what that's gonna be like going forward. Now, coming in at number 4, I have Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Yeah, just, this one is so cool. It's like a political thriller. It's also an action movie, obviously. It's an MCU movie. There's going to be action. But, like, the main draw for me, anyway, is just everything around the action. Like, the action's great, but, like, I love everything about this movie. I think it's so great. The villain, just the dynamic between Steve and Bucky, and finding out that Bucky was alive. The fake out Nick Fury death I actually like a lot. The introduction of Falcon. Like, this one is just really good. Now, coming in at the number 3 spot is actually a very recent MCU entry. I have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I love this movie. I just rewatched it the other day, and it got better on rewatch. I love how they handle Rocket's story, the way it's tied up, like, everything. I love this movie so much that, like, well, first of all, it's made its way into my top 5, and it's been out for, like, a couple of months. But also, this movie, like, pushed Rocket into being, like, top 2 MCU characters for me. He was already pretty high up there, but the way his arc is handled and what it's led to is just one of the best for me, and I just love the way it's all handled. Obviously, at this point, the cast, they've worked together a lot, so the chemistry is just as good as it's ever been. James Gunn, I feel like, has gotten a lot better at directing. Like, I feel like the camera work in this movie is really good compared to the other two. Not saying the other two were bad, but I feel like he's gotten a lot better at it. The soundtrack is great, as always. The villain, the High Evolutionary, great. Chuck Wudiawuji's performance, I love it. Yeah, just a really great movie. And now, coming in at my number 2 spot, I have Avengers: Infinity War. The stuff I said about my theater experience for Avengers Endgame, yeah, I had an even better theater experience for this one. Like, I know a lot of people hate when this happens, but when I went to see this, there were people clapped for a few moments in this. Specifically, I remember the moment when Thor arrives in Wakanda. Like, people cheered, and it was just, I was so happy watching this movie, up until everybody died. But yeah, this is just the best theater experience I've ever had, and I don't know if it's going to be topped at any point soon. And obviously, Thanos in this movie is just incredible. Like, great. Josh Brolin is great in the role. He's written very well. The CGI looks great. The action scenes are incredible. Like, the whole movie is just sick. And now, my number 1 spot. My favorite movie in the MCU. If you haven't been able to guess it by now, it's Captain America: Civil War. Okay. I was so excited for this movie, like, leading up to it. Like, I thought the idea of just the Avengers being split into two separate teams and having to fight each other just sounded so cool to my 11-year-old brain. And then I watched it and I loved it. And as time's gone on, I've just grown to like it even more. Because, like, there's so much great stuff in this movie. Like, all the action is very well directed. I think tonally it's great. Obviously, it introduces both Spider-Man and Black Panther, and I think they're both really great additions to the MCU. But also, I love this movie because even today, people still debate about who was right, whether it was Iron Man, whether it was Steve, Captain America. And I just think the fact that it still gets people talking, and I still see people get into heated arguments about that, just really shows the staying power that it had, and just how good the movie was. Like, I just, yeah, I could go on all day about how much I love this movie, but I have a feeling this video is already pretty long, so I'm gonna wrap it up here. That's my list. That's my ranking of the MCU. Let me know yours in the comments below if you want. I imagine not too many people are going to do that because that's like 43 separate projects to list, and that'd be a very long comment. But that's about all I've got for you today. See ya.